Hello everybody, welcome to Season 2 of Space Cover Teenage Astronaut. I am Joe, the Teenage Astronaut, and this is the first part of a two-part episode. And we're going to start off with pretty much what's going to be in this episode. Well, that's going to be stuff, pretty much Constellation Program. Because this is part 1 of the history of SLS. And because of that, we need to look into the predecessor of it, the Constellation Program. So we're going to do all that stuff, and then we're going to end with a little bit of a look into SLS. And then before I actually end the episode, I'm going to really go in depth about the changes to be made to Season 2. What's going to be different from Season 2 and Season 1. So let's get right into that, talking about the Constellation Program. So imagine yourself, the year 2004, and it's President George W. Bush, and the current NASA Administrator is Sean O'Keefe, and it has been just about a year since the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster. And with that, imagine you're just a bystander, and you hear that the President and the NASA Administrator have proposed a program to do a bunch of things, and on that list is replacing the Space Shuttle, finishing the ISS, sending humans back to the Moon, and finally putting people back on Mars. It would also be intended to continue to supply the International Space Station with astronauts and supplies instead of the Space Shuttle. They wanted to completely replace the Space Shuttle with Space Shuttle hardware, which is what's a little on the easy side about it. But the thing is, because it is a program, it has a lot of vehicles. Anything needs to have a lot of vehicles. You know, when you have a program like this, that's not to do so much. You have something that can do low Earth orbit, something that can do the Moon, something that can go beyond to Mars, Ceres, that kind of stuff. And then also, people are involved, so it needs to have a thing for people. Because that, we're going to talk about the Constellation Program's vehicles. In total, it had 5 different kind of craft. 5. It had the Ares 1, the Ares 5, the Orion Capsule, and finally the EDS and the Altair Lander. And the first one we'll talk about is kind of the smallest of all of this, the kind of one of the most easier parts of it, the Ares 1. The Ares 1 is what would have been a rocket that would have been a solid fuel first stage, a liquid fuel second stage, and then finally the Orion Capsule on top. I'm not talking about really any of the Orion Capsule in this portion of the video. I'm going to go really in depth into the Orion Capsule later on in this episode, and I'll probably go even really more in depth into it in part 2, because it is a major part out of a program that doesn't have that many vehicles in it compared to this one, so I have a lot more time to go in depth into it in that episode. So the Ares 1 would have been able to carry the Orion Capsule to either low Earth orbit or the ISS. Nothing beyond that. And it would have had a 5-segment SLB, and that's the thing, is it's a SLB, so this is a glass milk jug, but we'll just say it's a solid rocket booster. The thing about that, though, is you have this, and you have, your second stage in your capsule, which I have a McDonald's cup, so we'll say that's our first stage in our capsule with the escape tower. I'm using trash to do this, but details. And it's just, you see how this is kind of a janky rocket? That's the point. This rocket would have been a janky rocket, and you have a rocket that's like this. It's a super janky rocket. And so that's the thing with the Ares 1, is that's what it was. It had a 5.5 segment. No, it had a 5 segment, not a 5.5 segment. It had a 5 segment SLB on the first stage, but then it also had a liquid fuel second stage, which if I wanted to be realistic, I would have it more like this, because the second stage was wider than the first stage was. Which brings back the point. that, you know, wonky. And also the fact that the second stage was looking for the fourth stage wasn't. It's a complicated thing. But the second, so let's get back in the second stage though. The second stage, would have had a liquid that would have been powered by a J2X engine made by Rocketdyne. Also, just a little bit back to the SLB, because I'm completely going to talk about it. It was a 5-second space shuttle SLB. So, you know, bigger than the actual space shuttle SLBs. So, you know, 2 of these. I do have 2 milk jugs, but I'm not using both of them. I'm using this one because the other one's not downhill. But by the way, I'm gonna use this milk jug a lot in my videos now, because it's like actually a really good example to do like rocket stages and whatnot, because it's got this thing down here that is a lot like an engine kind of. So it's gonna be really useful for that. And I might eventually have it be like I have a video where I fill it up with water. We go outside for a little bit, and I kind of use it to show how, like, if you had a nozzle like this, which is a kind of nozzle, by the way, because it's basically, it's a simple rocket engine. It's the kind of nozzles you'd have for, like, solid fuel. I could do that kind of thing, but we'll see about that. Back to the point, though. The Ares 1 didn't get that far into testing. Out of almost everything in the program, I got the farthest into testing, but it still didn't get that far, which should say something about it. It's only had 1 test flight, and it was basically just the 4th stage. Like, it wasn't, it had a 2nd stage, but it basically was just the 4th stage. Like, there was a 2nd stage on it, but it might as well be this empty McDonald's cup, because it didn't have anything in it, and it was just a mock-up. So it wasn't useful, really. And it got that, and then it also had an Orion, the Orion Capsule had an onboard system test. And that was basically it for program testing. Like, it didn't do that much. But that is the Ares 1. And the Ares 1, a lot like the Apollo program, has a bigger brother. You know, a much bigger thing to replace it. And that is the Ares 5. The Ares 5 would have been an absolute behemoth of a rocket. And I mean, like, massive, bigger than any of your current rockets you got right now going up. Like, bigger than SLS, bigger than Starship. Would have absolutely dwarfed the Saturn V. This thing would have been massive. And actually, it's kind of sad that it didn't go anywhere. Because it would have been absolutely awesome to see it launch. Like, at least once, but never got anywhere, literally. It got a little bit of development done due to the fact that NASA with this program was going very step-to-step procedural, which is also the reason that the Ares 1 test flight was only the 4th stage instead of like the entire thing, which is, by the way, what they're doing with SLS. Keep that in mind, because it's taken them a lot longer to do it. And the Ares 5, though, because of this procedural, had almost no development work done on it, had not much done, because they were waiting until the Ares 1 was really working to then start using the Ares 5 before doing any work on the Ares 5. And because of this, the Ares 5, basically all there is information-wise, really, the Ares 5 would have become a rocket. It would have been very similar to SLS. So basically just like imagine like a much bigger SLS kind of thing. And believe it or not, it actually would have had 6 RS-68 engines. It's called the Ares 5 and would have 6 engines. And that's because originally it would have had 5 RS-25s, the Space Shuttle main engine. Keep in mind, SLS is keeping that and having 4 as RS-25s. So they're not using RS-68. But not long into development, after all the windows of what you can see were done, it was decided that it was going to have RS-68s instead, because they were a lot more powerful, and they were also less complex, because they were newer, really. They were a lot less complex, though, which meant that they were more powerful. have a lot more power to them. Wait, I already said that. Less complex meaning that they're cheaper. But also a lot more lightweight, so they can have more power, and also was kind of it's less complex. So it's also cheaper, but also because less complex means it's lighter, which means you can have more power. And you have more power, then you can make it be less complex, which means it's cheaper, which means you can get more power from it. And the nice thing about a rocket engine is just, it hits a point where you can't do this cycle anymore. And like SpaceX has hit that point with the Merlin 1D, where they spent a long time working on it to, have it be less complex, making it more powerful, and also making it cheaper. And they were doing this over and over and over and over and over again until the point where they just couldn't make it any better. It's the best of an engine it can ever be. But other than that, that's kind of it about the Ares 5. And if you remember, I didn't mention a second stage. That's because we have to talk about that later. Because in the program, it was a completely separate, like, its own vehicle kind of thing, which makes no sense. But it's what they did. So next we're going to talk about one of the last things is the Orion Capsule. This should sound familiar because this is the same thing that's going to be flying on SLS. It is the only part of this program that survived. The rest of the program died with the program. But it didn't. It is a spacecraft that would have been used for taking crew to the International Space Station with the Ares 1, the Moon, and beyond with the Ares 5. So Moon, Mars, possibly Ceres, that was an idea they had, and like just stuff like that. It would have had 3 blocks, and by the way, this is a lot like the Apollo program. The Apollo capsule had 2 blocks, not 3, but it had 2 blocks, and that was for the Block 1, which almost never flew, and it never flew with people on board, because the Block 1 is what the Apollo 1 mission happened with, and that didn't go well, and it just had a major flaw that they decided that they weren't gonna use anymore, and so they were really rushing to get Block 2 done, and Block 2 never really had any issues, unless you count Apollo 14, but that's a different concept. I might make a video on that later though, but what's really interesting is that it had 3 blocks. Block 1 would have been used for only low Earth orbit, a lot like the Block 1 of the Apollo capsule. It could only do low Earth orbit, nowhere higher. Yet 2 and 3 could go beyond, and planetary, really. So they mentioned it to the Moon, to Mars, to Ceres, to wherever. And that's kind of, like I said, I'm not going to go that in-depth into it this episode. I plan on doing it a lot more in-depth in the next episode. Like in like statistics and like things like that. So that's just what I want to. But now we're talking about the one of the most conceptual portions of this program. Not the most. That is still coming. That is this next vehicle that I'm going to talk about after this one. But this is the Altair Lander. It was a proposed lander. It was proposed. It almost got no work done on it. It was a proposed lander. Would have been used for only landing on the Moon. Was much larger than its predecessor, the Apollo lunar module. But just like it, it had 2 parts, a descent stage and then an ascent stage. There should be video on the screen right now of like old pictures or whatever, what it would have looked like. That's what I want to do with that. And it would have had 4 RL-10s. By the way, this is what the RL-10 looks like. That's right here. That is the same engine that is on the Central. This thing. It should be always what that is. And which by the way is one of the most efficient engines. For more in-depth on how engines work and whatnot, Everyday Astronaut, who I absolutely adore, I love to watch his videos, has a bunch of episodes that go really in-depth into engines, so that's a good thing to look at. He might actually have one on the Central. I'm not sure. I don't really remember. And this is where we get really conceptual into it. The ascent stage had basically no work done on it. Basically nothing. It would have very likely would have been hypergolic. So So it had hypergolic fuels, a lot of the Apollo lunar module, and that's pretty much it. Because by the time they got close to being able to do anything for that, the program got canceled. So, but here's the thing that is basically has nothing. Like, no engines, no weight, no fuel, none of that. It got nowhere near done. And that's the EDS, the Orbital Departure Stage. I talked about it, like I mentioned it at the beginning of the section, and how it was the second stage of the Ares 5, because it would have been the craft used to perform Altair's TLI-borne, so Altair and the Orion Capsule, both of those, it would have been used to put them to the moon, and it would have been the second stage of the Ares 5, and that's it. No weight, no nothing, just the idea about it. So they had all this stuff somewhat planned out. They were even getting close to having missions planned, kind of thing. What happened? Well, it's 2009. The Obama administration has very recently been put into office, and they decide to completely just cancel Constellation. And they do this due to overspending and slow development. Slow development due to that step-by-step process, and because it was slow, it caused overspending. So it's kind of like an infinite loop. And they canceled it, but there was one piece. There was one piece of the program that had gotten so far under development, it just wasn't worth canceling. And that was the Orion Capsule. It had abort tests, it had splashdown tests, it had recovery tests, it had seafaring tests. It had all of its capsule tests basically complete. Almost all of them. Because of that, NASA was able to get it the okay to keep it. Let it survive. And they decided to almost immediately begin and use it for the Artemis program. And we'll talk quite about it, and now we'll talk quite about that. The Artemis program. The continuation of Constellation. The Artemis program and the SLS, Space Launch System. So, Constellation is cancelled. It's gone. Completely gone. Just done. It's got no chance of coming back. NASA, though, still really wanted to go to the moon. Really, they never really wanted to stop going to the moon, but they wanted to go back. And this caused them to create the Artemis program almost immediately after. But the thing about it is, by this point, stuff like COTS, like the COTS program, Commercial Crew Program, and your commercial programs, so COTS, if you don't know that kind of not pronounceable. That's the Commercial Crew Program with Cargo Dragon and that stuff. By the time those were really used, and because there were a lot of its portions that were put to those programs, which we'll talk a lot more about in the next episode. But it would have used the Orion Capsule still, and the only change is between this program and the Constellation program was that it was to drop the Mars mission. I did not look at doing a Mars mission with this program. And also to use a very, very Ares 5-like rocket, the SLS. And also to drop low Earth orbit. So not go to the ISS, not do any low Earth orbit missions. And really only have one launching rocket for the program. For the crew portion of it anyways, the SLS. Which is what we'll talk about in the next episode. I'm looking forward to it for sure. I hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll see how that goes. I have a lot of ideas for this episode, like having, images and all that stuff up. Please respond. You can at me on Twitter, DM me on Twitter, TH Astronaut. If you have any ideas for me, if you're watching the YouTube version, you can just comment. I'll see it. And I hope you enjoyed. We're going to be, right before we end it, this is where we go off script. I want to just talk a little bit about Season 2 stuff. Season 2 is going to be completely different. Wild changes compared to Season 1. Season 1 is very experimental, and I do have an announcement. I am going to, on the anniversary of the first episode coming out, Freshman SLS Talk. I know some of you were there for that. I am going to do a kind of 1 year of SSBTA episode where I look back at the entire year of this and just looking forward to it. But yeah, we'll do that. I also looking forward to season 2. At some point releasing the new website. I am. Yes, it's an announcement. I have been working on a new website to replace the current Teenage Astronaut website. I've been working on it for a while now, for like months, but I'm looking forward to releasing that to the world. It's nearing completion, and I'm also planning on doing a bunch of other stuff. Like, all of them are going to be like this. Face. But we'll see what happens. I can't promise anything. I definitely can't promise anything. That's, it wouldn't surprise me if, I decide that it's not time to do stuff like this, and I decide I just want to do the original, what I was doing, but I am definitely enjoy doing the research and the work on all this kind of stuff. By the way, I do have sources. It's basically Wikipedia, because I don't have enough time to do anything else. I'm a mixture of Wikipedia and a YouTube video. I'll have it all my stuff down in the description. Don't worry. But that was loud. I am definitely looking forward to the season. We'll see where it goes. But yeah. Also, before I forget, Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. That is what today is for you. For me, it's Thanksgiving Eve. Right, today's the 24th, yeah. Today's Thanksgiving Eve for me, because I'm recording it the day before. I'm recording, editing, and scheduling it the day before. I should not be recording. I recorded it yesterday and the day before, but the one recording yesterday had audio issues, and before that I had phone head issues, and I'm using a new recording software. So, interesting. But yeah, the part 2 shouldn't be too long. December 15th is when I plan on releasing it, and hopefully I get that by then. If you remember, I'm 20 days late on this one, so it shouldn't be 2022 when this video comes out, but after this one, we'll see. But hopefully not. Fingers crossed. But I hope you enjoyed the beginning of season 2. I am the Teenage Astronaut.